No, Laura Kunsberg has not been making it up. Britain will leave the European Union at 11 p.m. on March the 29th unless something happens between now and then. It's a hot topic in politics and it's a hot topic in racing too. So to discuss it with myself, Lee Mottershead, I'm joined by the Racing Post industry editor, Bill Barber. Bill, as things stand, if Britain does leave the EU without a deal at 11 p.m. on March 29th, for our constituency, racing and bloodstock, what happens?
That's an easy question to ask, but it's quite a difficult one to answer, really. Horse racing, as with the rest of the country, is in limbo. But as things stand, if we leave without a deal, horses will be able to travel into the UK without any problem. The government said that they won't be changing any rules. The main problem is if a horse from Ireland or France comes to run at Doncaster, or especially Aintree the week after, it's how they get back. Because if the EU puts up the barriers that it could do under the rules, there'll be all sorts of veterinarian and logistical challenges just to get their horses back home.
So does that mean, in effect, a time delay in terms of, say, if Tiger Royal comes to Aintree, that it might take him longer to get out of the country?
Certainly, because to get back into an EU country, at the moment you'd have to go through what's called a BIP, a border inspection post. Now, there aren't many of those, either in the UK or in Ireland. Tiger Royal would have to, rather than a normal simple ferry journey or whatever, it would have to probably go to, I think there's 2 airports in the Republic of Ireland, which are the only border inspection posts. I think they're trying to build one at Dublin Port at the moment, but whether that will be ready in time, I'm not sure.
And presumably as well, would it follow that if an Irish trained horse met those difficulties, or any EU trained horse met those difficulties coming into Britain and then trying to leave Britain, if an Irish trained horse is running at Down Royal or Downpatrick, presumably that horse then would face a similar issue in the sense it's come from the EU to a country outside the EU and then it needs to get back into the EU. Absolutely.
I mean, in theory, a horse trained by Willie Mullins going to Down Royal, for instance, as things stand, would be able to go north of the border without any problem. In theory, it would then perhaps have to go to Scotland, from Northern Ireland to Scotland, to then get back to south of the border. Now, whether that will actually be the case is still unclear, even if we leave without a deal. But in theory, it's a possibility.
And Bill, in terms of the governing bodies of British Race, the BHA in Britain and HRI, France Gallo, obviously their senior figures will have been working on all these different scenarios for an awfully long time now. How far down the line have they gone in terms of what they would like to happen?
Well, there's been an awful lot of liaison between the 3 main European racing powers, and in Britain there's a thoroughbred, a Brexit steering group, basically. It's not just it's the BHA, it's sort of across the industry. In Europe, not only Ireland and France, but all the other, Germany, for instance, they've been going to the European Commission saying, look, we've had this freedom of movement of horses for all these years. We'd like this to continue. Unfortunately, under Brexit, it falls away. What they would like to do is a sort of a son of this agreement. It's called the tripartite agreement, which allows free movement at the moment between Britain, Ireland and France. And they'd like that sort of extended across Europe, where countries have the requisite standards. Unfortunately, nothing can happen until we've left. We can talk about it, but in terms of getting this system practically, in order, nothing can happen until we go.
And to what extent, talking to the people in power that you do you sense that within these high-level Brexit negotiations, the racing and bloodstock industries and their specific requirements and needs are on the radar of the various negotiating groups?
I mean, I spoke to the European Commissioner for Agriculture, Phil Hogan, at the Cheltenham Festival last year, and I know there was a delegation that went to see them recently. In the UK, you've had Michael Gove talking about horse racing and the Grand National and how it might be affected by Brexit. So it's definitely on the radar. Obviously, it's got to take its sort of placed behind other pressing matters as well.
And just in terms of other potential fallouts from Brexit, whenever it happens, if it happens, how it happens. We had a stable staff week in the Racing Post recently where I wrote a piece looking at the situation now and where we might get to, in which the BHA and the National Trainers Federation both expressed the view that potentially one positive aspect of Brexit could be that it made it easier to get stable staff workers from outside what is currently the European Economic Area and to bring people in. Is that a fair assumption?
Well, it is, as long as the staff meet the requisite sort of skills level. There was a committee reported last year looking at what sort of skill levels for people coming from outside the UK to come into work. If stable staff and especially work riders were included in those skills areas which are classed as being sort of rare skills and therefore
occupation.
Yes, shortage occupation, absolutely. So that could well help the sport, but it very much depends on whether stable staff and work riders are put in that category.
And but listening to people within the Irish racing and bloodstock communities, they sound understandably concerned about Brexit and its potential implications. From speaking within British racing and bloodstock as you do you sense that the constituency, the racing and bloodstock constituency, is largely a Brexit-minded constituency, or are they railing against it?
It's difficult to say. I wouldn't like to say one way or the other. I've seen opposing views. I mean, it could potentially, say, if you're a British-based national hunt breeder and that they put tariffs on Irish-bred geldings, then it could give a short-term. It could give a boost to the British jumps racing industry. Having said that, depending on what the economic impact of Brexit is, there's a potential downside if people have less disposable income to spend on horses or to go racing or to bet on racing.
So, Bill, the no-deal potential consequences are clearly, some would see as stark. If we do get a deal, maybe some point down the line this year or maybe even later than that, depending on how things pan out, will the end game, if you like, be identical to where we are now, or could you envisage changes being made to how we operate that might even potentially improve things?
Well, if we leave with the deal, the current arrangements, the tripartite agreement basically carries on while we're in the transition period. Yeah. And there might be a few extra checks, but it won't be anything too onerous. But we've still got to find a successor to that tripartite agreement. It will stop at some point. So during that transition period, what the racing authorities across Europe are trying to come up with is something that's called high health horse status. And it's basically a follow-on from the tripartite agreement, which basically says these racehorses are extremely well cared for, their veterinary standards are very high, sanitation's very high, they can move seamlessly between the various countries. So in the short, if we have a 2-year transition period, the current arrangements pretty much continue, but there will be a period where they're trying to bring in a successor to the tripartite agreement, which is this high health horse status.
And that high health horse status, would that in effect be a mirror image of the current tripartite? The
details have yet to be sort of gone through because the discussions can't really be started until we actually agree a deal and leave. I mean, it could well be an improvement. It's difficult to say, really.
Okay. And Bill, if you were summing up the situation at the moment, what would you be more confident in predicting the outcome of, Brexit or the Lincoln?
The Lincoln, definitely.
It's the Lincoln for Bill then, which rather sums up the complicated situation we find ourselves in at the moment.